Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 143 review. So as usual, I'll give the overview. Harpreet will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, and Joe on the platform. So the thing I want to announce is that we made two releases available on Monday. One is the Ivanchuk 7 release, and the other one is the Yansa 1 release candidate number 2. Both are mainly security fixes, and you can find all of the details in the blog post that I linked above there about both of them. Okay, on to the sprint statistics. So this sprint, we went down a little bit on both the merged PRs and the open PRs. I think as we're kind of nearing towards a release, we're planning what's coming in the next release. So there's kind of more discussion and less activity. That's what I'm attributing that to. Hopefully it'll pick up pretty soon. On the distribution of the PRs, as you see, they're mostly bug fixes. And by the way, I think these bug fixes that are in these PRs don't include the security fixes because they had to be done in private, and then just the commits were published upstream. So that's kind of the other reason why there's a lower count. Okay. On the repo health, the core repositories, the non-provider repositories, you see the data there in front of you. And then the provider repositories are here. Still working on doing, sprint to sprint differences, but haven't gotten there yet. That's not been an area of focus. Hopefully, at some point we will get that done. Finally, just wanted to give notice to a new capabilities matrix that we put together. You can access it by going to the website and navigating through documentation, user reference capabilities matrix, or the link right below. And really what it's meant to do is, besides the browsers and the runtime platforms that people have tested with ManageIQ, the more important things are the capabilities across provider families, because not each provider integration is at the same level. Some provider integrations are more advanced, some are less advanced. So this kind of will give us a good way of seeing where each provider is at. And then also there's capabilities of smart state analysis in there as well. And that'll give us some good reference of where we need to kind of what will work and what won't work. And so if you have questions of why doesn't this work on Rev versus VMware or something like that, just take a look at this matrix, and hopefully we've answered your question there of maybe something isn't even supported, or at least not yet, and PRs are always welcome. So with that, I'll turn it over to Harpreet on the UI.
Thanks, Oleg. Hello, everyone. So total of 19 UI PRs were merged, mostly bug fixes, 9 bug fixes and 3 enhancements. And there were few test-related PRs. In enhancements, support was added to be able to add Geneve network providers from UI, and we had our last set of provider forms converted over to DDF forms in container providers area. Next screen, please. A change was made to allow cut and paste of automate instance path to the screens displayed on this slide. Previously, the text box was disabled and the users had to navigate through the pop-up tree to be able to make a selection. So now they can use either they can cut and paste, or just make a selection in the pop-up. Next slide, please. A bug was fixed in toolbars before the bug fix. A plugin toolbar override could replace entire classic UI button groups by accidentally using the same name. And if multiple plugins do that for the same entity, a random plugin would be loaded. So this was fixed by adding a prefix to the button groups. As you can see in the before screenshot, it is loading only one random set of configuration button group. And in the after screenshots, you can see two sets of configuration button groups. One is from classic UI and another one is from provider plugin. Next slide, please. After the recent provider farm conversions to DDF, flash messages were not displaying the name of the record when a save or cancel button was pressed on the edit screen. So that bug got fixed during the sprint as displayed in before and after screenshots. Here you can see the name of the record being canceled by the user in the after screenshot. And that's all I have for the UI. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. Okay, so this sprint we found a nasty bug that was causing rev targeted refresh when you created a new VM to delete all the old resource pools and create new ones. This was a bug that we tracked down to an old legacy method to refresh new objects before we had support for graph refresh. So in core we fixed this, but it led us into looking at finally getting rid of that method and moving over to a newer, the newer method. So we'll cover that in a little bit. On the Amazon side, we added collection for RDS databases and flavors. This is pretty exciting because it's one of the first new object types that we're collecting for cloud providers in a very long time. So we're also going to be looking at collecting these cloud databases for Azure and Google coming up soon. For Kubernetes, we added class level verification methods for credentials for all the different endpoint types for metrics, alerts, and infrastructure. This was needed so that we could support the DDF forms for the new container provider ad forms. Next slide. So we started working on getting rid of that legacy method. We switched over to the new graph refresh style for event parsing, which is a much more flexible way of refreshing items that don't belong in that don't exist in the database yet. This set us up to remove that legacy method, and spoiler alert, in the next sprint, it's already gone. So that was pretty cool. On the VMware side, we found an issue where if you had credentials that didn't have access to request storage profiles, on the previous version on Ivanchuk, it would succeed. It would just log a warning that it failed to connect to the SPBM endpoint. In the new streaming refresh in Yansa, it was actually failing the refresh. So that was a discrepancy, a difference between those two. So we've fixed it up to just log a warning if it couldn't collect storage profiles. And we also deleted the parse new target from VMware, which wasn't used after we switched to streaming refresh and got rid of the broker anyway. But looking at deleting that legacy method led us to find that that method was no longer used anymore in VMware, so we deleted that. Next slide. And this is actually a carryover from last sprint, so I forgot to delete it. Next slide, and over to Joe.
Thanks, Adam. So this sprint, there were 25 PRs merged across the platform space, the most noteworthy of which were these few bugs. One issue was addressed where some instances logging the journal D were seg faulty, and this was fixed by re-enabling the journal D logger. Possible system D and container service deployments were failing was also addressed. A bug was fixed where Kafka exceptions were causing EVM events.add queue to fail. And another bug was addressed where in the Podify launches, OIDC configurations wouldn't complete because we had done most of our testing with Keycloak versions that supported a non-standard intersection endpoint. And the newer versions of Keycloak only support what's in the RFC, so they removed the non-standard parameter token intersection endpoint and only support introspection endpoint. So we plugged that hole. Another one with Podify was failing when you try to launch, you'd get permission denied for trying to create files in a directory. A little hard to nail that one down, but it was fixed by making sure when we build the RPM that we add write permissions to the directories. And that's it for the platform space.
All right. And I think that wraps up our sprint review. The next one will be in 2 weeks, sprint 144. Same time, same channel. And thanks everyone who contributed. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to the community. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.